Have you ever wondered why the woman who doesn't seek attention seems to possess a magnetic force stronger than those who beg for it? Why her silence carries more gravity than the laughter of a crowd? There is something almost ancient about her presence, something that unsettles both men and women alike. It is not arrogance, nor indifference, but a self-contained power, a quiet knowing that whispers, "I am enough without your gaze." Carl Jung would say she has met her shadow, and made peace with it. For a woman who no longer needs attention has traversed the underworld of her own psyche. She has faced the parts of herself she once hid behind validation, admiration, and approval. And now, she walks not to be seen, but because she has become the seer. In a world where attention has become currency, her refusal to trade herself for it is an act of rebellion. She has withdrawn from the theater of performance, the endless masquerade of likability and desire. She no longer dances for applause, because she understands that attention is not the same as love, and visibility is not the same as worth. To the unconscious male, she is both alluring and terrifying. For in her composure, he sees his own fragmentation. She mirrors his dependency on admiration, his unhealed boyish need to be adored. Jung spoke of anima projection, how a man projects his inner feminine onto a woman, mistaking her for the missing piece of his soul. But when he encounters a woman who doesn't need his gaze to exist, the projection collapses. He is forced to confront his emptiness, and she becomes a mirror too honest to bear. You've seen this before, haven't you? The way a man becomes restless around a woman who is not impressed. The way he begins to circle her like a planet around an unmoved sun. His ego cannot digest her lack of reaction, so it calls her cold, mysterious, unattainable. Yet beneath his words is confusion, because she represents freedom, and freedom is what he secretly craves. This woman doesn't reject connection, she simply refuses to perform for it. She has burned through the illusion that affection must be earned through charm, beauty, or submission. She knows now that real intimacy begins not when she is adored, but when she is understood, and she has learned that few are capable of that kind of seeing. She once tried to please. Once, she smiled too widely, agreed too quickly, dimmed her intuition to remain desirable. But every performance left her emptier than before, until the applause turned hollow and the mask suffocated her. Her awakening came not in triumph, but in exhaustion, the quiet moment when she realized that chasing love was the same as running from herself. That was her initiation. In Jungian terms, it was the death of the persona, the socially constructed mask meant to win approval. Beneath that death was something far greater, the birth of the authentic self. And authenticity, by nature, disrupts the world that thrives on illusion. You can feel it in her energy. She no longer flinches when ignored, nor blooms when praised. Compliments fall around her like rain on stone, pleasant, but not penetrating. Her power lies in this detachment, not as a shield, but as serenity. The storm can rage, the crowd can cheer, the lover can come or go, and still, she remains centered. This is not emotional numbness, it is psychological wholeness. Jung would call it individuation, the process of becoming complete within oneself. She no longer seeks to be half of anything. She has integrated the abandoned parts of her psyche, the wild woman who was shamed, the nurturer who was exploited, the child who was overlooked. Each has been brought home, embraced, and given a voice. Now, when she looks in the mirror, she doesn't see a woman waiting to be chosen, she sees a woman who already chose herself. Men sense this instinctively. To those who still live through ego, she becomes an unsolvable equation. To those who have begun their own inner journey, she becomes a muse, not because she flatters them, but because she awakens something sacred. Her silence teaches him presence. Her boundaries teach him respect. Her independence calls him to his own self-mastery, yet her power is not dominance. It is not a rebellion against men, nor a rejection of love. It is the reclamation of balance, the realization that true feminine power has never required performance. It simply is. It is the stillness beneath chaos, the moon's pull on the tides, the voice that whispers in dreams, "You are already whole." And when she walks away, she doesn't do so to punish or to prove. She walks away because her peace is non-negotiable. Because her soul no longer dances for spectators, and her worth no longer trembles beneath anyone's gaze, she has become, in Jung's words, the woman who owns her own soul. There is a strange paradox about the woman who no longer needs attention. The moment she stops chasing it, the world starts to notice her. But the gaze that once intoxicated her now feels different, lighter, almost irrelevant. The power that once belonged to others' eyes now radiates from within her own. Jung taught that every person must confront the shadow, the repressed, unacknowledged parts of the psyche that hold both fear and potential. For many women, the shadow is not darkness, but power. The suppressed confidence, the silenced anger, the unlived truth. Society taught her to be pleasing, agreeable, soft enough to soothe and small enough to stay loved. But when she faced her shadow, she saw the cost of that obedience. She saw how her craving for approval had become a quiet prison, gilded by attention yet hollow inside. So she descended, into solitude, into silence, into herself. It is in those quiet nights, when no one is watching, that a woman learns what her soul actually sounds like. She begins to hear her own instincts again, once buried beneath the noise of social validation. That descent, though painful, transforms her. For it is only when she walks alone through the dark that she discovers she was never truly alone. There, she meets what Jung called the self, the organizing force of wholeness that exists beyond ego. The self does not care for popularity. It does not perform. It simply is. And once she aligns with that self, her energy changes. You've probably felt it before, being around a woman whose energy feels grounded. Unshakable. She doesn't chase. She doesn't compete. She doesn't need to prove her worth, because she lives from the quiet conviction that she already has it. It's not arrogance, it's peace. Men often misinterpret this peace. To the unhealed man, her indifference feels like rejection, when in truth it is clarity. She has seen through the illusion that a woman's beauty or warmth exists to soothe a man's insecurity. She no longer offers her emotional labor as currency. Her affection has become sacred, selective, given only to those who can meet her on equal ground. This is why she appears mysterious. Her mystery is not in what she hides, but in what she no longer offers to those who have not earned it. She doesn't explain her silence. She doesn't justify her boundaries. Her stillness is not a performance, it's a statement of self-possession. Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This woman has claimed that privilege. But to do so, she had to sacrifice the comfort of being liked. She had to let go of the false safety that comes from being seen. And that, perhaps, is the hardest part, to release the need for applause when the echo of validation has defined your worth for so long. She learned that attention, no matter how flattering, is still dependency if it dictates your peace. And dependency is the opposite of freedom. So she chose the lonely freedom of authenticity over the crowded cage of approval. It is here that her presence becomes magnetic, not because she is trying to attract, but because she radiates something that cannot be manufactured: self-trust. People are drawn to her not because she entertains them, but because she anchors them. In her energy, They feel the faint memory of their own forgotten power. To the feminine psyche, this stage of individuation is liberation. She is no longer the maiden, the innocent who waits to be chosen, nor the performer who bends to the crowd. She becomes the sovereign woman, the queen archetype, who governs her own emotional kingdom. Her worth is no longer conditional. Her joy no longer hinges on whether someone texts back or applauds her effort, and to those who mistake her calm for detachment, they fail to see that her heart still feels deeply, perhaps more deeply than ever. But she has learned discernment. Not every hand deserves to hold her softness. Not every gaze deserves to witness her vulnerability. When she walks into a room, she brings with her a strange quiet that unsettles the insecure. Because power, when silent, exposes what is false. It is not the loudness of her confidence that draws attention, it is the peace of it. She no longer chases validation, she channels value, and yet, there is compassion in her strength. For she remembers the woman she used to be, the one who needed to be seen, to be chosen, to be told she mattered. She does not despise that version, she honors her. Because without her longing, she would never have begun this journey, so now, she smiles, not to please, but to express peace. Her smile no longer asks to be loved, it declares that she already is. There comes a point when a woman realizes that being desired and being valued are not the same thing. Desire flatters the ego, value nourishes the soul. And the woman who no longer needs attention has learned to tell the difference. She once mistook attention for intimacy, the texts, the compliments, the eyes that lingered too long. Each glance felt like validation, a temporary patch over the quiet ache of not feeling enough. But in time, she began to see the pattern. Every time she relied on admiration, she drifted further from her essence. Attention became her drug, and silence her withdrawal. It took courage to face the truth, that her hunger for attention was not about vanity, but abandonment. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so she made the unconscious conscious. She traced her longing back to its roots, the childhood moments when love was conditional, when affection had to be earned through performance. Somewhere along the way, she learned that being seen meant being safe. So she performed. Smiled. Softened. Adjusted. Until the performance became her identity, but something in her soul rebelled. Perhaps it was during a relationship that drained her spirit, or a friendship that praised her light but ignored her pain. Perhaps it was a sudden silence from someone she gave everything to. Whatever the trigger, she finally saw the truth: attention is not connection. It is often the illusion of it, and in that realization, something ancient awoke within her. A voice, small but steady, whispered, "You do not exist to be looked at. You exist to be known." That was the beginning of her awakening. Her withdrawal from attention was not bitterness, it was reclamation. The moment she stopped performing, the masks began to fall away. At first, it felt like loss. Fewer messages. Less approval. A quieter life. But in that silence, she began to hear the rhythm of her own authenticity. What she found there was far richer than validation, it was sovereignty. To stand in one's sovereignty is to no longer barter your energy for approval. It is to understand that peace is more valuable than popularity. It is to trust that what is meant for you will recognize you, even when you are silent. You can feel this sovereignty in the way she moves. There's a deliberate slowness to her, each action measured. Not for show, but for alignment. She no longer explains her boundaries, she simply lives them. When someone tests her limits, she doesn't explode, she disappears. Her absence becomes her final word, and yet, she is not cold. Her warmth has simply become selective. It is no longer poured into the unready or the unreciprocal. It flows only where it can be met. That is her new form of love, intentional, conscious, powerful. Men sense this, too. To a man who has not yet met his own shadow, she is unsettling. Her energy demands authenticity, and that terrifies the ego. He cannot charm her with performance, because she has seen too much of the script. She has lived it herself. She knows what it means to be drawn to potential and burned by promises. So now, she listens not to words, but to energy. She doesn't ask, "What does he want from me?" but "What does my soul feel around him?" It's this intuition, refined through silence, that becomes her new compass. It saves her from repeating old cycles. Where she once sought validation, she now seeks resonance. Where she once chased attention, she now cultivates peace. Her beauty changes, too. It becomes less about appearance and more about presence. Jung described this transformation as the integration of the anima, the feminine soul that connects the visible and invisible worlds. This woman has embodied that integration. She no longer draws power from being admired, but from being aligned. Her radiance is not the kind that shouts, it hums. In stillness, she discovers what philosophers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius meant by inner fortitude, the ability to remain unmoved by praise or criticism. For what is Stoicism, if not emotional sovereignty? And what is individuation, if not spiritual autonomy? She lives by both now, merging ancient wisdom with modern strength. And when people ask, "Don't you care what others think?" she simply smiles. Because she once did. Deeply. Painfully. Until caring became a chain around her spirit. Now, she has traded the illusion of acceptance for the truth of authenticity. And nothing has ever felt lighter. Those around her begin to notice that she no longer reacts. They call it indifference, but it is not. It is mastery, the ability to stay rooted when the world tries to shake her. Attention may still come her way, but it no longer defines her, it merely passes through her. She receives it with gratitude, but not attachment. In a culture obsessed with visibility, she has chosen invisibility as her strength. Not to hide, but to remain sovereign. Not to disappear, but to dwell in her own being, because the woman who doesn't need attention has found something infinitely greater, self-recognition. And once a woman recognizes herself, no one's gaze can complete her, and no one's absence can diminish her. When a woman no longer needs attention, her very existence becomes an act of quiet revolution. The world does not quite know what to do with her. She is no longer moved by the usual strings that control others: flattery, rejection, comparison. These things used to tug at her heart like invisible marionette wires, each word, each silence, shaping her mood, her self-worth, her choices. But those wires have been cut. Now, she moves freely, not because she has become emotionless, but because she has learned emotional discipline. This is the difference between repression and mastery. Repression hides, mastery transforms. Through her inner work, she has turned her pain into wisdom, her longing into discernment. Her solitude into strength. There is a stillness about her now, a groundedness that unnerves those who depend on chaos to feel alive. In her, drama finds no foothold. Manipulation finds no entry. The games of attraction that once thrilled her now bore her, for she has transcended them. The woman who doesn't need attention is not playing hard to get, she simply isn't playing at all. Jung once wrote that a person's outward relationships mirror their inner ones. The woman who has reconciled with her own soul no longer projects her unmet needs outward. She doesn't seek rescue, validation, or reassurance in others because she has learned to provide them for herself. That self-sufficiency, born of pain and patience, radiates as quiet authority. It's not the authority of dominance, but of alignment, the kind that commands respect without demanding it. To the awakened man, she is a revelation. He does not feel diminished by her independence, he feels invited by it. Her calm presence calls forth his higher nature. Around her, he cannot hide behind charm or control, her authenticity strips away his defenses. She becomes, as Jung would describe, a mirror to his inner feminine, his anima. In her wholeness, he sees the possibility of his own. But for the unhealed, she is unsettling. They mistake her peace for pride, her silence for rejection, her boundaries for walls. They try to provoke her, to pull her back into the theater of reaction, because her stillness exposes their noise. Yet no provocation can move her now. She has learned the sacred art of non-reactivity, the power to observe without absorbing. You can sense her inner dialogue, though it's rarely spoken aloud. When the world demands performance, she answers with stillness. When others seek to drain her energy, she answers with distance. When love calls but chaos follows, she answers with silence. This is not avoidance, it is self-respect. She has learned to sit with discomfort. To let emotions rise and fall without letting them dictate her identity. This is the essence of both Stoicism and Jungian individuation, to feel deeply, but not be ruled by feeling. To engage with the world, but not be consumed by it. She embodies this balance effortlessly. People often mistake her for detached, but those who truly see her understand, beneath that composure lies immense sensitivity. Her empathy is sharper now, not because she gives it freely, but because she gives it consciously. She no longer carries the pain of others as if it were her own. She holds space, but no longer sacrifices herself within it. There is a sacred geometry to her energy now. Everything has its place. Everything has its purpose. Love is no longer chaos, it is communion. Desire is no longer desperation, it is curiosity. Attention is no longer sustenance, it is scenery, and so she becomes the embodiment of what Jung called the integrated feminine, not the submissive muse nor the hardened warrior, but the balanced sovereign who walks the line between tenderness and power. She knows when to open, when to close, when to speak, and when to stay silent. Her intuition no longer whispers, it commands. You might think this kind of power isolates her, but it doesn't. It refines her circle. Only those aligned with her frequency remain. She no longer attracts those who feed on insecurity, she attracts those who resonate with peace. Because energy seeks its reflection. The woman who doesn't need attention becomes a magnet not for chaos, but for clarity. She has also learned the paradox of power. The more she owns it, the less she needs to show it. There's no longer a need to assert, defend, or explain. Her worth speaks for itself, quietly but unmistakably. Like a deep river, her presence moves beneath the surface, still, powerful, alive, and yet, her journey is not about superiority. It's about liberation. She has freed herself from the collective hypnosis that says a woman's value depends on how others see her. She has returned to her own eyes, her own voice, her own soul. And that freedom radiates, gently but undeniably, into everything she touches. There is beauty in this kind of freedom, subtle, ancient, and unspoken. She doesn't shine because she wants to be seen. She shines because she has stopped dimming. In time, the woman who no longer needs attention begins to move through the world with an almost mythical quality, like a figure half remembered from a dream. People feel her presence before they see her. They can't explain why they feel safer, calmer, or more alert in her company, only that something about her steadiness calls their scattered selves to return home. She embodies what Jung meant when he wrote that the most terrifying thing is to fully become oneself, because she has done it, and it shows. There was a time when she feared invisibility, when being unseen felt like erasure. But now, she understands the paradox. What the world calls invisibility is often just sovereignty unadvertised. She does not need to be everywhere, because she is fully somewhere, within herself. Her attention, once scattered outward, is now turned inward like sunlight focused through a lens. It burns through illusion. It creates clarity. When she walks through her day, her silence speaks volumes. She listens more than she talks, observes more than she reacts. She has nothing to prove, no one to chase, nothing to fix. Her energy feels like clean air after a storm, refreshing, still, quietly alive. She carries herself with the grace of someone who has forgiven herself for once needing too much, and the discipline of someone who will never again settle for less. This woman has discovered the secret Jung hinted at again and again: when you integrate your shadow, you cease to be controlled by it. The parts of her that once sought validation, the pleaser, the seductress, the savior, have not been destroyed, they have been integrated. She no longer exiles them into shame. She thanks them for their service, for how they protected her when she didn't yet know her worth. In this integration, she becomes whole. That wholeness changes everything. The men who come into her life now sense something different. They feel seen, but not idolized. Challenged, but not judged. Her attention no longer inflates egos, it refines them. Her love no longer feeds addiction, it awakens consciousness. She doesn't want to be worshipped, and she refuses to worship anyone else. She wants truth, bare, mutual, unguarded truth. And that kind of truth can only exist between two people who have met their own depths. When a man tries to impress her, she smiles gently, sensing his effort but not rewarding it. She looks past the performance and straight into his essence. It's not cruelty, it's invitation. She is calling him home to himself, the way she once had to call herself home. And only the man who can withstand being seen without his mask will stay. The rest will retreat, blaming her for the mirror she held up. To her, this is not loss, it is alignment. For she has learned that rejection is protection, and solitude is sanctuary. There is no panic in her aloneness now, no rush to fill the silence. In solitude, she communes with her intuition, her art, her faith, her breath. She has become her own witness. And when she does open her heart again, it is not from emptiness but from overflow. This is the mature feminine energy Jung wrote of but rarely saw fully expressed in his time, a woman who embodies both eros and logos, heart and intellect, emotion and discipline. She can feel deeply without drowning, think deeply without detaching. She carries both softness and steel, not as opposites, but as complements. The world cannot label her because she lives beyond polarity, and yet, her journey was not easy. Becoming a woman who doesn't need attention required dying to the version who did. That death was not metaphorical, it was emotional, spiritual, psychological. She grieved the girl who gave too much, who tolerated too long, who mistook visibility for love. She buried her with reverence. And from that burial rose something luminous, a woman who no longer defines herself through the eyes of others. Her peace is quiet, but it's not passive. It has edges. When people overstep, she doesn't negotiate, she simply withdraws. When energy feels wrong, she doesn't argue, she listens to her body and leaves. Her intuition has become her compass, her boundaries her map. And because she trusts both, she moves through life with the kind of confidence that cannot be taught, only earned. Now, when attention comes her way, and it still does, it no longer intoxicates her. It amuses her. She sees how temporary it is, how easily it shifts, how much it says about the giver and little about her. She accepts it as one accepts the weather, pleasant when it shines, irrelevant when it fades. For she has found a light that does not depend on the sun. This is her forbidden power, the power that terrifies those who thrive on control. She cannot be manipulated through praise or silence, through affection or withdrawal. She has stepped outside the game entirely. Her self-worth is no longer up for negotiation, and so she walks, softly but surely, through a world still addicted to spectacle, carrying a serenity that feels like rebellion. She no longer needs to be seen to exist, nor loved to feel worthy. Her existence is her statement, her wholeness her crown. There comes a point in her evolution where everything she once chased now flows to her effortlessly, not because she is trying to attract, but because she has become. Her energy no longer reaches outward. It radiates. The same people who once overlooked her now whisper her name in curiosity, unable to understand what changed. But nothing external has. The only thing that shifted was everything internal. This woman has become the embodiment of Jung's individuated self, whole, balanced, and ungoverned by the false personas that once fractured her. She no longer divides herself to fit in, no longer shrinks to soothe others' insecurities. She walks in her fullness, and that fullness has gravity. It is not boastful, it is simply undeniable. Her presence exposes the fragile architecture of a culture built on attention-seeking. While others perform to be seen, she creates to express. While others chase affirmation, she moves from purpose. She has realized that attention is the cheapest form of energy exchange, quick to gain, quick to lose. What she seeks now is reverence. Not from others, but from within. Reverence for her own time, her own emotions, her own boundaries. She lives by a new rhythm now, slow, intentional, unhurried. She chooses experiences that nourish her instead of numb her. She builds her life around meaning, not noise. She doesn't need the crowd to witness her glow, she has become the flame and the temple both. And because she no longer clings, everything she desires comes to her freely. Opportunities unfold without force. Love finds her without searching. People feel drawn to her not for her performance, but for her presence. The universe responds differently to a woman who knows she needs nothing. It bends toward her calm the way the tide bends toward the moon. Still, she remains humble. She knows the path of awakening is not a finish line but a continual unfolding. There are days when doubt visits, nights when the old hunger for validation stirs faintly like an echo. But she no longer fears these moments. She welcomes them, sits with them, learns from them. They remind her of how far she's come, and how alive she still is. Her relationships are no longer arenas of performance, but mirrors of expansion. She chooses partners, friends, and companions who reflect her peace rather than challenge her sanity. She has no interest in emotional chaos disguised as passion. What she craves now is resonance, energy that amplifies her truth, not one that demands she dim it. Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And that is precisely what happens in her presence. Others transform. Her serenity invites introspection, her detachment awakens curiosity, her authenticity gives silent permission for others to remove their masks. Without preaching, she becomes a catalyst. When she speaks, her words carry weight, not because they are loud, but because they are real. When she loves, it feels like sanctuary, not spectacle. And when she withdraws, it is not punishment, it is a return to source. Everything she does is rooted in awareness. Everything she allows is filtered through alignment. And because she no longer clings, everything she desires comes to her freely. Opportunities unfold without force. Love finds her without searching. People feel drawn to her not for her performance, but for her presence. The universe responds differently to a woman who knows she needs nothing. It bends toward her calm the way the tide bends toward the moon. Still, she remains humble. She knows the path of awakening is not a finish line but a continual unfolding. There are days when doubt visits, nights when the old hunger for validation stirs faintly like an echo. But she no longer fears these moments. She welcomes them, sits with them, learns from them. They remind her of how far she's come, and how alive she still is. Her relationships are no longer arenas of performance, but mirrors of expansion. She chooses partners, friends, and companions who reflect her peace rather than challenge her sanity. She has no interest in emotional chaos disguised as passion. What she craves now is resonance, energy that amplifies her truth, not one that demands she dim it. Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And that is precisely what happens in her presence. Others transform. Her serenity invites introspection, her detachment awakens curiosity, her authenticity gives silent permission for others to remove their masks. Without preaching, she becomes a catalyst. When she speaks, her words carry weight, not because they are loud, but because they are real. When she loves, it feels like sanctuary, not spectacle. And when she withdraws, it is not punishment, it is a return to source. Everything she does is rooted in awareness. Everything she allows is filtered through alignment. She has become the woman who no longer seeks to be chosen. She is the chooser, the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.